Okay, people, back again. What do I have this week? This week I have a fun one. The Silmarillion by good old J.R.R. Tolkien. Look at that version. Look at that copy I got. I think it's from the 70s or something. Yeah. Old school art. I think this might be the art Tolkien himself drew. Not for the cover, but they like grabbed it, right? Okay, so this one might be a teensy bit controversial, but we'll survive, right? First off, the cost. Is it available? Where can I find it? You can find it anywhere, right? 11 to $17, I think. I think more for a hardback. You probably get it leather bound. This crap's popular. Tolkien is popular, obviously. You know I didn't pay that much for it, right? You know your boy got this for stupid cheap because that's how he rolls. Yeah, I think I got it for $2. I love estate sales. Okay, my rating is going to be unexpected, right? Unexpected rating. Because I'm a massive Tolkien fan, right? Massive. But my rating for this one is going to be a 2 out of 5. 2. Um, this is not right. This is not a, a real story. Not like the Lord of the Rings. It's definitely not for a common reader, right? If you just like to read in general, this one's too much in the weeds for you. It's especially not for non-readers, right? Don't even suggest it to them. It's too much for them. But what do I mean by not a story, right? Well, I mean, like even on the cover, it says J.R.R. Tolkien's Silmarillion, right? The other books, what is it? The other books say J.R.R. Tolkien, right? Well, what's the difference? Why are they saying this? What's going on? What are you talking about? I'm talking about Tolkien did not publish this. Yeah, this was he was working on this when he died, right? It's his big like reference book. He made his own reference book, so to speak. Now, they published it, his son did, with his notes, obviously. These are his written words. But I mean, if it would have been finished, he would have said, "This is finished, go ahead and publish it." Right? He did that with Lord of the Rings. It took a long time. And what you lose in that is some of the polish that Tolkien can give you. Um, Connecting all of the elements, a proper story arc. All these sort of things are kind of missing from the Silmarillion. It's more of a reference book, a history, so to speak. The way things come at you, you know. So in that sense, it isn't really like a book, right? It's not a narrative, so to speak. It's just a history. And so I can't give it even a 3, right? It, even Tolkien, if you're like I like Tolkien, right? Even those people might not like the Silmarillion. Now if you love Tolkien, right? If what is it? If you've just seen the movies or the TV show, the new one that's come out, and you're like that Tolkien sounds interesting. Don't start with the Silmarillion, right? If you've seen the movies and read the books like once, and then the TV show got you hankering for more, still don't read the Silmarillion, right? Go read the appendices at the end of Lord of the Rings. That is more tailored, right? Having said all that, if you're a diehard, if you just love Tolkien, if you reread and reread The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, You and I both know you're going to read the Silmarillion, right? It's there. It's extra lore you can grab. Grab that bad boy and read it. And if you're a massive fan, you will enjoy it. For the diehards, this is like a 4 or a 5, right? It's weird. It's the weirdest rating I have so far for the diehards. If you're not a diehard, then don't read this book because it's not actually a book, like I said. Okay, so sort of getting into the meat of the book now. Again, it's a big book. There's a lot of names in this book. Like I said, it's not tailored, right? It's not tailored for consumption. A lot of names. So just remember that going in. We start, and I'm going to cover sort of certain elements in the book that are that are carry themselves over into the Lord of the Rings, right? Because that's what it was. That's not what it was built for, but that's what it was really used for by Tolkien. On top of, I think he liked to roam around in his work. We start with the music. This is how the entire universe was made. Um, Again, and it even says this is the music according to the Eldar. The Eldar being a particular group of elves, right? So we get a bunch of elves who wake up, and then like half of them start heading towards the west, which is where the Valar are. Some stay, they get a different name. Some get to the shore, they get a different name. Some go all the way across the water, they get a different name. Those are clearly the best, right? Better than those other losers. This is how they act. You start to see the prejudice of elves in the book, which is fairly interesting and important for you to understand the rest of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. So, they have their god named Iluvatar and his offspring, the Ainur. They start singing a song and they make the world. That's how they do it. And at first you're like, that's an odd way to start, right? As far as mythologies goes, I suppose. Not a lot of singing out there. But he does it on purpose, right? And if you watch and look at Lord of the Rings and you see they will have certain, like I think Theoden yells out in a clear voice above all ever, the super loud voice. The dwarves hide their language from other people. Oaths that are taken mean they carry more than the weight of the oath, right? It's like you're bound magically to it. There's the magic and power in words, in vocalizations throughout the Lord of the Rings book. And it's more subtle in Lord of the Rings than in the Silmarillion, but it is still there. Um, Sort of what I always end up thinking of too is Bilbo's poem about Aragorn, the "all that glitters isn't gold" poem, right? And to me, it's not just a poem about Aragorn the Ranger. It's almost like because he has Bilbo write this poem and say this poem. It's almost like the essence of the hobbits, right? Whatever let's say if it's magic, he's lending that weight to help Aragorn out, right? So if you can read it that way, where this is verbiage, like an incantation or something, but not as obvious, more subtle, right? I think we have the same in the Hobbit when we're the dwarves before they start their meeting, they sing this song, right? Like why are you singing a song before you start a serious meeting? It's like you're calling on those powers of your ancestors or the mountain or whatever to fortify you before you do what you got to do, right? It's a theme in Tolkien's work. Another theme is degradation, right? And you see a lot of it here because, well, what he has is you start at the best and you slowly whittle yourself down to where you're now, right? That's how he likes to do his mythology. So, the Einar and Ilúvatar sing, that made the world and everything, and then it got a little off because of Melkor. So when the elves sing, it's very beautiful. It has a power of its own, but it can't match the previous singing. And then the same when we boil it down to Aragorn, we're just not even singing, we're sort of doing poems. And it can't match the song, but it still has a power, right? Until we trickle down to today, where, or not today, but the good old days, where your word was your bond, right? And you had honor. Down to today, where everyone lies and none of it matters, right? He likes the idea of a degradation in his mythology. And you'll read a lot like, no one was more pretty than this, and no tower was greater than this tower, this kind of thing. It plays a lot, all throughout. You'll start to notice it. And speaking on the bias, because it actually says, a line here, it says, uh, the chapter's called Vala Quinta, and underneath it's called Account of the Valar and my Ar according to the lore of the Eldar. It even says according to their lore, and I'm like, why does it say this? Because other places in this book, it talks about things that they don't know, right? There were certain elves that lived in that never came. Sindar elves, I think. They stayed in the woods. They call them wood elves. They did things that these elves do not know about because they weren't there. They were way on the other side of the world, right? Um, when men awaken way on in the east, there's history there that happens that these elves do not know. They're on the other side of the world, and he writes a bias into the books, right? Which is again a testament to his skill. And you see it play out in Lord of the Rings a little bit, and you see it play out differently in The Hobbit because that's Bilbo, a hobbit, not an Eldar elf, hanging out with dwarves, also not hobbits. And then you have a very different energy throughout these books. But I think another point to it is, in his mind, he was making a lore, right? A mythology. And I think he even says it in an interview once where he wishes, other people could come and fill in the other halves. So if someone came, theoretically, and wrote a dwarf lore, it would have a different feel. Um, they might even see facts differently, right? And it would still fit with what Tolkien gave us because he gave his its own slant. History's, you know, 5 different books on Peter the Great, and each person sees it kind of different, right? Even you grab an autobiography, that's that the original source's point of view. It's still going to be different because he sees facts on the ground differently. Everyone has his point of view. And it's very cool, and I like it a lot that he put it in his book. People don't mention it. People seem to take everything in this book as gospel, right? This is what it must be. I'm like, no, that's what that elf saw. That's what that elf remembers, right? And memory can get a little squirrely, right? I kind of remembered I ate more. I kind of remember more people were there. I kind of remember this, right? So they give us Morgoth, the dark enemy of the world, and he establishes his evil stronghold. This is one of the Valar, one of the gods. He comes down and he's like empowering evil crap just because he's evil, right? He's got what do we use? Sort of like envy. Envy and greed are kind of the root of what spiraled him down the sort of the dark side. Dude's out here making vampires, werewolves, this kind of thing. There's all kind of evil stuff in the Silmarillion. It's very heavy. Um, what did I have? What else did I have? Um, it says here the Valar, the gods, see themselves as sort of okay, they see themselves as children of Iluvatar, the god, just the same as men and elves are children of Iluvatar. So in their minds, they're not above either of the other groups. They would be more chieftains, not masters, if that makes sense. And it says in various times when they act like masters, when they want to tell them what to do, it ends up going wrong because you sort of don't have the right to do that. And this again is an element that carries through because we have the Valar acting out of place with the elves, and then the elves run off poorly, right? So when they get to Aragorn's time, the Valar have learned not to interfere so openly, right? They more help. They didn't tell you what to do, but they're like hinting at it, right? Like a soft whisper. And if you're inclined to hear it, you'll hear it. Then it's up to you if you want to listen, right? This is how they do it. Subtle throughout the book. If you watch where water comes into play with Boromir and Faramir, water also with the hobbits when they're stuck in Mordor. Very subtle. But then it plays the elves do the same thing. When men first wake up, the elves are over involved in men. And it has bad repercussions, so to speak. Numenor getting devastated and all this and that. And you see it in Galadriel when in The Lord of the Rings, she's not going with the group, right? She gives them gifts, small gifts, very, a pen, a little light vial, cloaks, rope, advice. She's learned the same lesson the Valar learned in not interfering, in just subtly helping so that it's their choice and not yours, right? She's learned this. It's a tear. You see the tears go on. It has a part in here where it talks about the dwarves being made. They're made by who was that guy? I forget the name. Rip. He was made by one of the Valar because that Valar was just an eager beaver. He was so excited. He made dwarves. And as he was making them, Iluvatar comes and like gives him life. Then that guy freaks out. Then they sort of have a conversation where it's like Iluvatar's going, well, if, I made you and you made them, I kind of like them, but I'm not going to have them wake up before my other children. That's how it writes it. And again, it's more of the biases because as it reads, we're going from sort of telling a story to making a point if you read it. And you can almost feel the elf going, yeah, well, elves were first. It's like a pride thing to them that he wants to make sure elves came first, right? And I'm sure if I got that dwarf history, It'd say, no, dwarves were first. We were roaming around underground. Then elves woke up, but we didn't bother them, right? It might it'd probably say this, but it's you get this, you read it almost in the text. It's biases. It just kind of bumps out a little, and then we go back to telling the story. We get a deep dive into some elves, and I'm talking deep dive. Calaquindi are elves who went to the uttermost west. That's what they always call it. Obviously, because the person writing the book went with the Valar, the uttermost west. You can't go any further. Obviously makes them better than everyone else. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that in words, but you can read the attitude, right? If you know what you're looking for, you read the attitude coming off this book. They're like, you went east. What are you, a bum? Got to go west because that's where I am. The closer you are to me and the uttermost west, the better you are. Imagine that. I'm like, that's bias, bro. We have the Teleri. They went with the group of elves, but then stopped at the shore. So you're better than them dirty wood elves who stayed, but you're not better than me because I went over the water to the west. You see what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying? And you would think, like, by those rules, Galadriel's better than them because she was born in the uttermost west. But no, it's probably better to be first, right? Then they're like, oh, you're changing the rules now, right? I was first, but I was way over east. She was born in the good spot. Shouldn't you? No, that's not how we're going to do it. It's better if you're first and went west and went to the uttermost west because that's what I did. And I'm better than everyone. Are we clear? Yeah. Then we have Moraquendi. They call them the Elves of Darkness. They never even traveled west. They stayed in the woods, like I said. They never saw the light of the trees, right? I'm like, oh, you're so full of it. These Eldar, these high elves. The trees were actually the light of the world, right? So, like, if you were far enough from the trees, you just lived like in twilight, like in a perpetual twilight, which sounds pretty cool. The trees were literally just two trees that let off light. Like, why, I don't know, but that's how they rolled. Um, we fight Melkor like 4 times in this book, right? We fight him when he's in Middle Earth and scare all the people. Then he's in prison for a long time. Then they let him out. Then he comes back. Then the elves fight him, and they can't beat him, obviously. Then the Valar fight him again, and then like keep him in prison. And there's like prophecy if he'll come out again at some other time. It's a hot mess. But in the time after the First War, when they're in Valinor, the Undying Lands, where the elves and the gods lived, no one else can go over there, by the way. Men can't, and dwarves can't. You're not allowed. Only us. It's a club for us. Right? And it's a bias, but you see, I'm like, why do they do it this way? Because I think in the book it says Ilúvatar gives mankind a gift of death. Right? Which is a weird way to put it. But it's some kind of, the way they describe it, it's they get released out to Ilúvatar. Whereas when the elves die, they just go to the halls of Mandos, and then eventually they'll regain their bodies, right? So they are tied to Middle Earth, where men aren't, and the Valar are the same, I think, where they sort of are tied to Middle Earth. So now they're like made a club for themselves because they're sort of salty that they don't get to go upstairs with the big chief there. Again, it never says any of this, but you can read in between the lines that this is what's happening. In any case, when Melkor's right after his first prison sentence, they sort of release him and he's sort of wandering around helping people. He has knowledge, wisdom, and he gives this knowledge out. You need a tip on making such and such, he'll help you make it. You don't know about plants, he'll tell you about plants. It says, though, It says Melkor says Feanor is the most talented of all elves. And then they go on like a long half a page diatribe of saying in every kind of way possible that Feanor didn't learn from Melkor. He never looked at him. He never talked to him. He actually hated him. None of his tools, none of his craft. No, he didn't even half check his notes before making any of his stuff. Right? That they go on a long diatribe to make sure you know that Feanor had nothing to do with Melkor. And the first thing I think is like, what is it? The elf doth protest too much, right? You're sort of going overboard saying you didn't. But what's more likely? Feanor, who's um, craft-minded, right? He likes to make things. Add to it, he runs hot. He gets salty at people fairly quickly. I think his dad remarries. He doesn't like the new lady. He doesn't like his brothers. Fingold, I think. Fingolfin, whatever his name is. He doesn't like his brothers. He gets hot. Right? His passions run deep in Feanor. Which is normal. If you see anyone who's very extremely world-class good at their craft can have these streaks in their personality. This unrelentingness, right? Like a Michael Jordan. Wasn't the most pleasant person to be around. Was just the best at basketball ever in the world, right? It takes something. That something has an effect on your personality. So what's more likely, that this person didn't go to the one with the most craft, with the most ability, with the most skill to learn? Even if he half thought he was evil, he would be cocky enough to think, it won't faze me. I'm Feanor. You see what I mean? And you look then, sort of the works of Feanor start to have a different outlook. Sorry about that. I don't have a cough button. This bad boy is in one take. Right? So the Silmarillions, like, because they were made by Feanor, let's assume they now have this subtle taint, right? This subtle, not good evil, because that's what Melkor was doing at this time. He wasn't flat out evil. He hated everyone and hated them more day by day, but he wasn't like doing openly evil stuff. It was more whispers in your ear, lead you down the wrong path. He gave them the idea to start forging swords, right? Which Feanor made some weapons. I'm like, were they all good? You didn't need a sword before. Who are you gonna kill? Other elves, which is what he ended up doing. Kind of a douchey move. You see? So it's not that he made you bad. It's he, like, let's say, stoked the flames of greed, of envy in Feanor, right? And then the works of Feanor cause a lot of problems. We have multiple, half the book is the War of the Silmarils, just trying to get them back. They're just orbs of light. They're just orbs of pretty light, or crystals, right? He has the skill to take the light of the trees and put them in his Silmarillions. 3. When the trees get lost, he then doesn't share the Silmarillions, and then they get lost, and we have a whole war, right? So, and then we follow that track down to his son, and it repeats, right? Celebrimbor, his grandson, I think, wants to make great works. He founds a city. Holland, I think they call it. Founds a city, makes rings of power, right? And they also say, Sauron tainted the rings of men, the rings of dwarves, but not the 3 elven rings. I'm like, how'd that happen? Sauron was beautiful, walking around hanging out with elves, accepted by everyone, a man of lore, of knowledge. You don't think a grandson of Feanor, wanting to achieve something akin to his ancestors, wouldn't talk to this one? who's accepted by all the other elves. He didn't have a hand in making the rings, especially when he made the one ring, right? Of course he did, right? And it's the same tier progression Tolkien likes. The same problem here repeats itself in a smaller way, and it'll repeat itself, and it'll repeat itself, right? It fits, and it shows you their bias, and there's a purpose to the bias, right? That it all starts to connect together. So I talk about the trees dying, and this is Melkor's doing. He goes and finds Ungoliant. Ungoliant is like a massive evil spider. I think they say Shelob's like a descendant. Again, the tiers. Ungoliant. Shelob's a descendant of Ungoliant. The spiders in Mirkwood are probably descendant from a Shelob. Smaller, bigger, biggest. Evilest, evil, less evil. They all want to kill you, right? They do it in different ways. He has this progression. He likes a progression. Ungoliant, they said, was there before the Valar showed up. So their assumption, and it is an assumption because they don't know, these elves. They say she like came out of the void and just hung out in Middle Earth. So it's like maybe like just a creature of darkness. And we have, again, hints of this throughout, where there's eviler stuff than just evil. There's not all just orcs. There's some stuff that's good. A Tom Bombadil, he's just good. Ents are just sort of good, that hang out in the world, that predate some of the other stuff. Tom Bombadil especially. But to equal it out, there's evil stuff that I'm assuming the Watcher in the water is some evil thing that just lurks in the earth. Not Melkor's doing, not anyone's doing. It didn't need any help to be a douche. It just is a douche on its own. And Shelob is one of these, right? She's one of these just hit monsters from the deep. She shows up and she starts hanging out with Melkor. Melkor uses some of his godlike power to empower her, make her even more evil. She'll take that crap. She has something called the Unlight, where she can just around her make a cloud you can't see through. Utter worse than darkness, which again you see in Shelob. Frodo goes in there and it's just a darker than darkness, this oppressive gloom that seeps into your into your bones. Tear. He loves a tear. He uses this darkness to roll up into Valinor and then boy stabs the trees and kills them. Right? Because he's a douchebag. He stabs Feanor's dad and then steals the Silmarillions. He just wants them. They're nice and he wants them. There's the light's pure and he's evil, right? So even in the chest that it's in, it burns his hands holding it, but he doesn't care. Like, you're just full of hate. So he stabs Feanor's dad and he yeets it out of there. And then, of course, Feanor's like, my dad has been killed. And then he goes in and swears the biggest blood oath you ever did swear on anyone. And it makes a point to say, like, a mountain is a witness, which is also pretty cool because, again, like I said, there's things that predate. I think the mountains have an essence, right? That is watching the world, the same as rivers, the same as, right, an Ungoliant. There are these presences in Earth, in the Middle Earth, that predate and postdate all the events that we're dealing with. So that Feanor gave his oath to two gods and the mountain is just like, not anyone anywhere doesn't know that I'm under this oath. And he swears to get the Silmarillions back by hook or by crook. And if anyone or anything, man, woman, or youngling, gets in his way, that he's going to kill them too. Flat out, period. And his sons and his brothers instantly swear the same oath. And I'm like, they locked in. They're done for now. And some of this is Melkor's doing, right? He stokes the negative in these people that makes them hot-headed like this. And that's the reason we have these wars. They encourage a bunch of these elves to not trust the Valar and go back to Middle Earth. The Valar are like, don't go, it's going to end bad. Again, verbiage. It's not just the Valar saying it's going to end bad, it's them like prophesying. So if you leave under this setup, you're bound to that prophecy, right? I believe Galadriel leaves, but not for the oath. She leaves to see Middle Earth, right? Which, if you keep reading other texts, it ends with some confusion. Because there's a part that she thinks she can't go back. She thinks she's bound to it, but she's technically not. So that she can go back. But it's some of the reasons she stays. And Galadriel's its own thing, right? But this is where that happens, where she goes with them. And I'm going to be honest, Feanor is just a douchebag from beginning to his horrible ending. He goes across, he wants boats. They don't want to give them to him, so, no. Yeah, he wants boats. They don't want to give him the boats, the boat people, the boat elves. So he kills them. First kinslain, kills a bunch of elves, takes their boats. Then instead of like sending the boats back for everyone else, he burns the boats. So there's no other way other than this massive ice path. The Hexachron or something like this. And that's the path I think Galadriel takes. She's just trudging along. It's a horrible ordeal. So they get across finally because they're going to like, I'm with you. And they're not happy. Feanor, like, as soon as he sees any kind of Melkor, he like charges headlong. Like, I don't give a crap. Dude ends up dying to like 5 Balrogs. Power scaling out of hand. Right? Again, the elf's like, my boy Feanor can't go down to just one. He can't get stabbed by like a little hobbit. He's got to go down to some heavy. A little biased, maybe. Did it probably happen? Maybe. 5, maybe not 5. Right? Maybe it was just 1 or 2. In any case, 5 Balrogs show up, kill him, and literally stomp him into the ground. That's the end of Feanor. And they say that he stayed in the halls of Mandos because his spirit burned so hot that it hadn't cooled off yet. Even to this day. Runs hot. So then what we're left with is the oaths his brothers and the sons of Feanor took. And they carry these oaths out. They keep killing elves, bro. Once they get some kind of word that an elf has a Silmarillion, they go over there and like, give me it. And everyone who has it's like, I'm not giving it to you. And then they start stabbing. It's kind of douchey. It's kind of douchey. They all end up dying, right? So a lot of the book feels like a Debbie Downer because everyone in the end ends up just dead. Some way or another. I think one of them hurls himself into a pit, this kind of thing. These horrible, not good ends. And all the Silmarils end up just lost, right? One gets chucked into the ocean. The other gets chucked down a chasm or something. I forget where the other one goes. And one ends up on Arendel's forehead. It's a long story, bro. Oh, but on Ungoliant, I almost forgot. I got sidetracked. It says, okay, so just to show you the scale. They leave, and she's still like hungry. She's always just mad hungry. She's like, give me, you decide to feed me out of both hands. That's what she says to Melkor. So he starts feeding her jewels from Valinor. She eating them up. She liked that crap. And she sees the other hand ain't opening. That's the one with the Silmarillions, right? She's like, what's in the other hand? Give me that food. I want that. He's like, I can't give you. These are mine. I'm taking them for myself. So she wraps him in the darkness. He can't get out, right? This is Melkor, who all the elves can't beat, who it takes all the Valar to beat, the strongest of the Valar, can't get out. And some of it's he lent out too much of his power, right? It weakened him, which is another side element that this evil can't make anything. It tears at you, almost literally. It tears at him, makes him weaker. In any case, she's not about to let him go, and if eventually she's probably going to eat him too. Balrogs have to come and save him, right? They literally, crack the whip and scare Ungoliant off. She runs off into some mountains that were called like the Mountains of Gloom. But then it says it doesn't know what happened to her, right? Now, the writer says, and the writer, I don't mean Tolkien, I mean whatever elf is writing this. It says that she gets so greedy with hunger that she ends up eating herself, right? And I'm like, that's convenient. To me, it sounds like a convenient excuse to help you sleep at night, if you know what I mean. Like if this thing terrorized you, right? You're in terror of it. It's a horrible thing you can't do anything about. But it's not around. You can start lying to yourself and saying, you know what, that thing, that was just a myth. She probably ate herself. It's not real. These kind of things, right? You tell yourself lies so you're not spooked by it. I think that's what these elves are doing. I think they're lying to themselves. Because we have, it says she went off south. So south and east, especially east, there are huge tracts of land in Middle-earth that these elves don't explore. Aragorn barely touches some of these spots, right? Way down east. I wonder if she went east, right? And if men, not elves or dwarves, had to deal with her. And it like fires the mind to think of the implications, right? That he leaves, he doesn't close the door, right? You're not in a room with the door closed. He paints a picture out so you can see the horizon in the painting, even if it's not clear. That's how he's painting this, where to me it's like, no, that crap's just out in the world. Ungoliant's somewhere out there. Maybe one of these men with a group of dwarves or something, a hero, came and killed her. But that's a tale for a different day, and these elves do not know it, right? They do not know what happened to this evil thing, and it is massively evil. But it said she mated with monsters, essentially, with the other beings. So I'm like, it says she ate some of them too. So some she X'd out. Some evil things that came from who knows where, maybe she ate, did us all a favor. But not before she, like, maybe that's where vampires came from. Maybe it's her, right? Or yeah, and then Melkor used some of those to, like, if you made the first vampire and it's like an evil bat, like a Dracula bat, then Melkor got the bat and from them made normal vampires that are just people. Normal werewolves from the big evil wolf. I'm like, I can see that tear coming. So cool. All right, let me see how long this is before I keep going because, yeah, it's getting up there. How do I want to do this? All right, I'm gonna skip some parts. Yeah, I'm gonna skip some parts. I'm gonna do in general now because, well, I've been doing in general, but I'm gonna do a generalized of sort of the Silmarillions and what's happening here. I already did the war. Now, when you're reading this book, at first read, it feels quick, right? Like, they build a city and then it dies. This person's heroic, then dies. They have a battle plan and it fails and they die. So it's a lot of negative, 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 and it can give you the sense of just doom and gloom. It's sort of, not a happy book. But I think it you need to illuminate another part of Tolkien in how he does sort of his outlines, which is what this is, right? If he'd have finished it, it'd have been another fat boy like Lord of the Rings is. He can describe a Gondolin, an elf city, but you shouldn't see that like Gondolin and then it gets destroyed. You should see that like someone built New York or Madrid and then lived in it for like 300 years, right? There's a lot of things, same with Ungoliant, where unspoken. There's a lot of things that could have happened, been built, love stories, offspring, that could have originated from Gondolin, right? This full city, and everyone didn't die in that city. A lot of soldiers did when it got taken. But when a city empties, all that culture goes with it, right? And that culture then fills our world in ways. So if you let your mind go, like that painting with the horizon, out, you can imagine the lore and the craft of these elves affecting the world, right? I think Gandalf ends up with a blade from Gondolin, right? I want to say if Sting might be from Gondolin. I'm not sure. Might be even older. But if you take these things like because he can write from a bird's eye view and not get too in depth. He focuses more on the battles in this part, but I bet you could have full books just on Gondolin and never leave the city and it would be impactful to your love of Lord of the Rings, right? To your love of Tolkien. But he didn't have time to put that all in there. And if you take it in that sense, if you remember the length of times we're dealing with, it doesn't feel so depressing, right? Because everything has its end eventually. But it hits you hard if you don't keep that in mind, right? When he can go very specific. He does timelines in the Lord of the Rings where it can just be like the battle of the Fords of Isen, and there are like parts where he expands on that battle, very in depth, with interplay between some of the characters, where one wants to guard one way, the other wants to guard another. They have arguments about it, heroisms, because the decision is one thing and the outcome's another. And there'll be heroic acts in the course of this, right? So it's this main arc, and you can zoom in, and it'll be another little arc. He does that, and if you can keep that in mind when you're thinking of these cities and of these people, it goes a long way to helping your enjoyment of this book. We get a good story of, not a good story, we had the story of Turin, and the story of Turin is everything goes wrong all the time. It's kind of like an idiot, like a loser. I know he was cursed, blah, 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 but you didn't have to act the way he acted. It just all goes wrong for my boy Turin. All wrong. The counter opposite of this is Tuor, his like cousin or something. I don't know how those work. His father's brother's son is Tuor. Tuor. I don't know why I can't say it. He does everything right. He's a massive hero. I think they say he just rides off into the sunset, and he might be one of the ones who doesn't die. Like the only mortal man to not die. He just does everything so great. He's a hero through and through. Ends up with like an elf wife. Right? So, and this is important for the Lord of the Rings because him and his wife, they end up having Arendelle. Arendelle, because and then Tuor rides off into the sunset. So we now are left with Arendelle, who's like the son of a massive hero. He ends up marrying an elf too, or a half elf. He ends up with the Silmarillion, one of them, a Silmaril, And the sons of Feanor try and kill him, but they can't get to him because he rides off into the ocean. He rides off to get help. Because of the curse, the Valar can't help the elves in their minds. But the elves can't win against Melkor without help. And men can't go ask for help because the men aren't allowed on the Undying Land except for the super heroic Tuor. Tuor. Right? So Arendelle goes in for both because he counts as both. He can technically step on land, and because he's not an elf, he's not bound to the oath. Like men aren't bound to the oath. So he's asking for men and for elves and for everyone if the Valar can come and help. They say yes. He ends up choosing to be an elf because his lineage of people get to choose. He ends up choosing to be an elf. He keeps a Silmarillion. They make it into a crown. He puts it on his head. And then he flies in the heavens, literally. That's his ending. That's his gift for all the good he did. He doesn't got to go back to the Middle Earth. Him and his wife hang out on the boat. But you literally, he's a star that goes across the sky every so often. And it's mentioned in the Fellowship of the Ring when Frodo first meets some elves. They see this light and they start singing. Because that's Arendelle on a boat with a Silmarillion on his forehead. Just so you know how bright this light is. It's an odd myth, but there it is. That's what happened. But his sons, one of his sons is Elrod. You know, you love him from the Lord of the Rings. His other son is Elros. They're twins. Elros decides to become a man. And after the war, where the Valar come and help and finally, lock up Melkor again, they give the men who helped, a gift of longer life and an island. That island being Numenor. It goes into this some. Elros becomes their king. Because who would be more kingly than this former elf, right? Bias. In any case, that's who they pick as their king. They all have longer life, this extended lore, and then the same tier happens with them as with the elves and the Valar, where they interfere with Middle-earth, and we're looking for this balance. But his line goes right on down to Elendil, who survived the sinking of Numenor. Numenor was sunk because Sauron tricked everybody. And it goes right down to our boy Aragorn, son of Arathorn. But again, it can be depressing, but you have to think of Numenor the same as you think of Gondolin. It had, like Rome, this long history and did a lot of good. Artifacts from there end up in Middle-earth. They founded a bunch of cities along the coast, Umbar being one of them, and had an effect on other people, right? It's just the city did go. You're not getting that back. But the life of the city continues, so to speak. It lived through these people. But it had a long up and down. Some people lived just born and died, lived 300 years on Numenor and only knew goodness, right? So you got to keep that in mind. He's focused because it's an outline on the main beats. But they're not all the beats. They're not the full story. It had its pride and it if you take it like it should be, it doesn't feel so depressing. But if you don't, Silmarillion can be depressing. All right, I'm going to check the time again. All right, that's long enough, right? We'll start our ad portion of the program. I know you all love the ad part the most. It's a fun book, right? You'll like it if you love The Lord of the Rings. But if you don't hang on to these elements, if you don't think about it in this way, it all feels too depressing. Everyone just ends up dead, bro. Let me learn about this guy so I can watch him die. That's what it feels like. But that's not how it was, right? You got to remember that. And obviously there was a lot more smaller to the point elements that I didn't bring up that also carry on through. It's a reference lore book, right? But also don't forget that it isn't Tolkien. He did not publish this, right? So you got to give him some leniency there. He didn't intend for you to read it this way. If he'd have finished it, you'd have seen obvious differences. But it's worthwhile, I think. All right. I think that's long enough for the ad, right? Go buy my books. Give me Latinum for the buck. Not just give it to me. That's wrong. All right, people. Good looking out. I'll talk to you all next week.